So welcome back to the Robotic Life. The maker of one of the most iconic consumer robots of all time, the Roomba, has officially filed for bankruptcy. iRobot didn't lose because people stopped wanting robot vacuums. They lost because of regulation, stalled innovation, and competitors that simply move faster. This is a story about how an American robotics pioneer got trapped in limbo while their Chinese competitors ate their lunch. And the irony? The very regulators who claimed that they were protecting competition may have helped destroy the only major American player left. iRobot was founded in 1990 by a group of roboticists from MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab. From day one, this was a real robotics company, not a consumer electronics brand that stumbled into robots. Early on, iRobot built robots for military and industrial use, including bomb disposal robots that were deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. But everything changed in 2002 with the launch of one product, the Roomba. Roomba didn't just become popular, it created an entire new category. For many consumers, Roomba was robotics. Over the next 2 decades, iRobot sold tens of millions of robots worldwide, becoming the dominant name in consumer home robotics, especially in the United States. At its peak, Roomba controlled roughly 60% of the U.S. robot vacuum market and became one of the most recognizable robot brands on the planet. iRobot went public in 2005, and for years it was viewed as one of the few successful examples of commercial robotics done right. But that early success came with unintended consequences. When you define an entire category, the bar for what comes next is almost impossibly high. And even with all their previous success, iRobot was never able to fully recapture that original robotic magic. For years, the company tried and struggled to move beyond robot vacuums. The Roomba was iconic, but replacing that level of success proved far more difficult than creating it in the first place. Not for lack of ambition. iRobot experimented with a wide range of home robotic projects, everything from gutter cleaning robots, pool cleaning robots, robot mapping systems, and even robot lawnmowers. And one of the most promising of these efforts was a product called Terra, a robotic lawnmower designed to expand iRobot beyond indoor cleaning. But Terra never really launched. It was put on indefinite hold during the pandemic, and that pause became symbolic of a larger problem. iRobot had ideas, but not the scale or the resources or the infrastructure to execute on them fast enough. iRobot didn't have the cloud infrastructure, the manufacturing leverage, or the capital flexibility to take multiple home robots from concept to mass market at the same time. And that's exactly why the Amazon acquisition made sense. With Amazon's resources behind them, iRobot believed it could finally accelerate beyond Roomba and launch an entire new category of home robots. And in August of 2022, Amazon announced it would acquire iRobot for $1.7 billion in an all-cash deal at $61 a share. Amazon wanted access to iRobot's home mapping data and their spatial intelligence inside millions of homes. iRobot needed cash, cloud infrastructure, and scale to compete with the rapidly evolving, lower-cost Chinese brands like Ecovacs. The CEO of iRobot at the time of the acquisition, Colin Engel, praised the deal, saying it was a win-win for both companies. Then in May of 2023, the European regulators stalled the deal. The EU ultimately blocked it at first, arguing that Amazon, as a dominant retailer, would have incentive to delist competitors like Ecovacs off their website and bury the search results in favor of Roomba. Then the FTC in the United States piled on. Their concern? That Amazon would use Roomba's home mapping data to further strengthen its smart home monopoly. The stated goal was to protect competition. The actual result? They didn't save competition, they destroyed the only major American competitor. And instead of an Amazon-backed US champion, the market was left wide open for Chinese giants. That's the irony. While stuck in regulatory limbo, iRobot was bleeding cash. With no buyer and no clear future, R&D stalled to a crawl, product innovation stalled. To survive, iRobot took out a massive $200 million loan from the Carlyle Group in 2023. And one of the conditions of getting that loan approved was that Amazon would pay it off. When the deal collapsed, iRobot was suddenly saddled with $200 million in debt it could not service. And until then, iRobot had been virtually debt-free. And then in January of 24, Amazon officially walked away from the deal. And iRobot was left with a staggering $200 million in debt and a product line that had effectively stood still for 18 months during the acquisition. The fallout was swift and immediate at the company. They laid off 30% of its workforce, the CEO resigned, and the stock collapsed from a high of $60 to around $15 a share. And while iRobot was frozen, their competitors were not. At the time, Roomba controlled nearly 60% of the US market, but Chinese firms saw an opening and they swooped in. Companies like Ecovacs began flooding the US market with cheaper, better combo robots, a vacuum and mop system combined. And while iRobot was frozen in regulatory limbo, its competitors never slowed down. They kept shipping and innovating, and they introduced something that completely reset expectations in that market, the Omni Station. Think of the Omni Station as a car wash for your robot. When the robot docks, the station empties the dustbin, washes the mop pads, dries them with hot air, and then refills clean water, sometimes detergent as well. Suddenly, the robot wasn't just autonomous on the floor, it was autonomous in maintenance mode. Ecovacs wasn't optimizing just the robot, they optimized the entire system. Robot, dock, software, and the full user experience. With an Omni Station, you could go weeks without touching the robot. Once consumers experienced that level of automation, going back felt like a downgrade. iRobot tried to respond, but by then the bar had already moved. For years, buying a robot was like buying an iPhone. Expensive, but it just worked. By 2024, buying a Roomba felt like buying a BlackBerry in the age of the iPhone. iRobot's technical problems didn't start with Amazon, but once the deal was announced, innovation slowed to a crawl. iRobot stayed locked into a navigation system with their Roomba product that relied mainly on cameras. Think of it as a blind approach. Roombas tried to understand a room by looking at it, using visual landmarks and slowly learning the layout over time. The problem is pretty obvious once you think about it. Cameras need light. Run a Roomba at night with the lights off and it can lose its bearings. Mapping takes longer and performance drops with shadows or glare. Ecovacs took a completely different approach. Instead of trying to see the room, they measured it. They used newer technology called LiDAR, that small spinning sensor you see on top of many modern robot vacuums. LiDAR maps an entire floor in seconds. It works in complete darkness and doesn't get confused by lighting changes. While iRobot was still trying to see the room, Ecovacs already knew where everything was. And in robotics, knowing beats guessing every time. And the final blow to the company came in early 2025 when the US imposed new 46% tariffs on imports from Vietnam, the very country iRobots had moved its manufacturing to in order to avoid China. That single policy change added roughly $23 million in costs, wiping out any remaining path to profitability for the company. Then in November, something almost unbelievable happened. PICEA, the company that they had literally outsourced their manufacturing to, purchased $190 million of their debt from Carlyle behind their back. And today, iRobot has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That once high-flying tech stock is now a penny stock trading at a little over $1 as of yesterday's close. In the end, it's easy to blame the regulators for the Amazon deal. But the uncomfortable truth is that iRobot stopped acting like a tech company long before the bankruptcy lawyers showed up. They brought a knife to a laser fight. While Ecovacs was pushing more powerful hardware and LiDAR-based navigation into its robots, iRobot was still arguing that cameras were good enough. While Chinese startups were building massive Omni stations that washed, dried, and refilled themselves, iRobot was telling us that hand-washing mop pads was a feature, not a bug. They relied on their brand name. They relied on the idea that Roomba was a synonym for robot, much like Kleenex is to tissue paper. But in the world of consumer tech, nostalgia doesn't clean floors, innovation does. iRobot spent the last 3 years trying to be safe and repairable. Ecovacs spent them being fast and aggressive. The lesson for every CEO listening is clear. If you stop moving forward, you die. The Roomba is dead. The Omni era is here. As always, I want to hear your thoughts. Was iRobot doomed by regulation or outpaced by faster competitors like Ecovacs? And what does that mean for the future of Western robotics in a market that no longer waits? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the episode, hit the like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. We've got a lot more coming on humanoids, AI, and companies that are defining the next decade of robotics. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. This is Lars, and you've been tuned into The Robotic Life.